What's up? This is In My Circle, and I'm Ralph, also known as DJ Noise. How's everything? And tonight, well, today, or morning, wherever you're watching, the story, the channel, please like, subscribe, and share. But today, I'm going to be speaking about a man that has so many, has been scrutinized, very controversial individual. I mean, it's around, October, and we recognize him as a hero. I mean, in the United States, for the most part. His name is Cristobal Colon, also known as, or better known as, Columbus, Christopher Columbus. Now, this guy, we are said, it is said that he is this hero, 1492, he sailed the ocean blue, discovered America, and they shut the book on it. Well, I mean, I'm launching we could say is my own investigation, research. I'm doing a project. I don't know if I mentioned in my last video that I could be working on a book. I'm not sure, but I want to read. I want to know about him more, better in detail. And what better way? I mean, let's be honest. Better way. We only know about Columbus because of the great, the magnificent writer Washington Irving, who wrote this amazing story. I mean, it is a story. It is, he wrote The Life and Voyages of Christopher Columbus. And next, if you ever Google the title, right next to it, it is going to say a fictional biographical book account of the writings and the stories of Christopher Columbus. Basically, he interviewed as many stories that were handed down. He did his due diligence, but he wrote about, in some of the book that I read, he wrote about, the way he built the book. He wrote, he inserted a page and some writings about, documents and or journals, a sheet of a journal note. And what he did basically, he filled in the story, the background, which that is the fictitious story and account of that story. That's the fictional part. Great writing, great book. It's just when he narrates it, he's telling his story from his point of view. It's a great book so far. I'm not that far, but as you can see, I have a lot of volumes. You see, when Washington Irving first came out with, I think, the book of Columbus, I think it was maybe one book with the whole entire story. I could be wrong. This was in 1828. I could be wrong exactly on that book, on the date, but I think I'm close. I think the last video I said it was 1850s. But he died in the 1850s, if I'm not mistaken. He wrote this book in the early 1800s. He's also known for writing Rip Van Winkle, legendary Sleepy Hollow, some sketches. He was a writer for a newspaper that I think his family owned. So, and incredible writer. I can't take anything away from him. But I think the story was captivated and caught into one book maybe. And later on, after his passing, they released more volumes. I mean, I don't think the one book here, The Conquest of Granada, I'm not exactly entirely sure if that's part of the story, but you can see the greed started to sit in and they wanted to sell more books. So, how do you keep coming back to read it? Well, you get this book and then they release this book and then they release that book. So, I mean, I'm not exactly sure about this, but we'll say it is part of it because there's a lot of parts about the voyages. There's a lot of things about the voyages, you know, um, you know, conquest, conquistadors. You know, there's a lot of things that are still left over from what Columbus started in the islands and the New World, versus as we say. So yeah, these are my personal books. I got a lot of the Irving books, not a lot of them, but a little bit more. I have a second copy of the first print because I want to read it inside out. What better way? And I figured, hey, I'm gonna read one, tear it up a little. These books are probably from the 1900s, so I figured get another one. So if you tear it up, you won't. You can tear up that one and keep it. You get what I'm saying. I also got a book that's a bestseller by Lawrence Bergreen. Bergreen. I'm not sure if I said that right. It's a New York Times bestseller. It's Columbus and the Four Voyages. I'm going to read this as I guess, an updated, mirrored version of something in here. I'm also going to be researching in a book of the journals, documents of the life and voyages of Christopher Columbus. I don't know. This is translated and edited by Samuel Eliot Morrison. Now this may not be the full story. This could be some of the story. I don't think I don't think this is telling me. I just think this is just letters from his friends. His yeah, it's a pretty old one. Um, I had it, so I mean sometimes I use it to read. To sometimes it's
They call me glass beer.
um
How you doing?
I'm good. How's everything?
Okay.
But this has more of the accounts. This more has the conversations. You know, and last I have a book of the explorers. This I picked up at a. Yeah, this is nice. This has a lot of cool information. It has maps and stuff. How the map looked. I picked this up. I was just looking for Columbus books, something pertaining to Columbus, at a thrift shop, at a Goodwill store,
Oh,
and I think this was maybe $2, $3, and it is definitely more in a store. Probably like a $30. It's probably definitely a. I mean, it's pretty brand new.
it's
Um,
amazing what you can find at a thrift store.
yeah, and I mean it's hardly unread, but I mean I am investigating the man. So there's a story in here pertaining to one of the sailors or one of the soldiers who completed Columbus's quest. Don't know what that means, but I want to read it. Why? Because I'm researching. It's my project that I'm working on, and if I do turn this into a book,
Mm-hmm.
why not? But I have the receipts. Without even going in further, I think I've mentioned before a famous person by the name of Bartolome de las Casas, a sailor converted into a priest when he witnessed 3,000 uh, Taino, Arawak, indigenous people, individuals get murdered in front of him. And one day, it was so traumatic that he trembled every time he thought about it. And that moment in his life changed his life. He converted into, he became a Catholic priest, and he declared himself the protector of the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean. And, well, he, after being, converted into Catholicism, he wrote journals. Of course, we were talking about Columbus in his journals, but he also wrote, the accounts of what was going on. Remember, Columbus's journals may not be as detailed in the barbarity, the brutality, the murder, the atrocities, and the genocide that and the abuse, and it was just horrific. It wasn't as I don't think it was as detailed as we're not told. I don't think it's that detailed in his journals. I mean, although he did write certain parts, and he said that with a few men that he could subjugate a whole entire civilization of indigenous peoples.
Mm-hmm.
He did say that. It was in his writings. I haven't gotten that far yet. I haven't read all this yet. I don't know. One day I woke up and I said, I want to investigate more of the story because I'm considered somewhat knowledgeable in this field. I'm pretty good, with it.
Yes,
So
you
I
have.
figured.
You really did your work. You did your homework.
I mean, I figured if I'm going to do more research, I might as well get down to the actual, the real story. And it's crazy because I started reading some of the story and I found that some of the, there's a letter in there from the 1800s, 1831, that it says some of the work collected has been adulterated.
Right.
Translated in Spanish. It came from somebody in Spain, Europe, whatever. And in the book, not this version, I have an 1884 version where there's a letter that, we also know people know him as Christopher Columbus,
Right.
but in some of these books, they refer him as Cristobal Colon.
Yeah.
Also Colombo and Columbus.
Columbus.
So there's, nobody really knows who this guy really is. There's many other names that he was known as.
Right.
And I'm not picking on Columbus because it's Columbus, day is in a week. I'm just saying I want to know what is fact and what is fiction about his story. We say the word history is his story. His story. Washington Irving's story that we're reading as history. But it's really his story. This is where that analogy, his story, that is tied to history, is embroiled and forever submerged in those two categories, like fact and fiction, submerged into a story that became history. It's a web that's forever like woven. And when people say, let's erase Columbus,
Right.
right? Everybody says let's erase him. Well, why not? Why the hell not? Right? I mean,
Well,
he was genocidal,
disagree.
a homicidal, full of genocide, and and I'm going to get you to the point of why I said this.
oh, okay.
Why the hell not? Right? He was full of genocide. He abused women. Taino indigenous women. They were Arawak, Carib. He brutalized. The indigenous peoples. The way of an encomienda. An encomienda means, you have to mine these. You were enslaved to mine these gold mines, silver mines, and until you had a quota. These poor people had a quota, and if they didn't meet, let's say, 1% or you know an ounce or a half ounce per a daily or or monthly, weekly, whatever your quota was, if you didn't meet
Meet
that,
that.
they would chop off an appendage. They would chop off a a part of your body. It would be either a finger, a private part. We're not going to go into it was really really horrific. You know, some of the conquistadors would pick babies up, Taino babies, and in that time these men were starved with lust. They seen these beautiful figures of women completely naked in front of them, and of course these Spaniards, conquistadors, you know, they would take these women and they would have babies. So of course, they were ashamed, for having Taino Spaniard babies, and so they weren't claimed, like they wouldn't, recognize them as their children. So they would take them and just throw them out back and feed them to hungry dogs. This is rumored. This is rumored to be fact. I mean, don't quote me, but why would you not believe this if you already if I told you that this man was evil and this is the reason? I mean, you wouldn't know unless somebody told you. Well, famously, this priest Bartolome de las Casas wrote a lot about what happened. Witnessing 3,000 people get brutalized and, let's just say, unalived. This is the word that we use. They use on YouTube. So we're going to use that terminology. They unalived about 3 people in one day. One day. It didn't matter how they did it. They brutalized. Just barbaric. And why? What benefit would a priest have to gain when everybody's against him in the beginning, right? Now he's the protector of the Taino Indians, right? Because this is what they call them, the Indians. But we know them as Taino Arawak indigenous peoples. That's the correct, what they are. So when the women were given birth, going back to the babies, women were given birth to, either other Taino babies or mixed, Taino and Spaniard babies, because they were, it was probably mostly because it was probably mostly Taino,
Right.
because the Taino mothers would give birth, and literally right after giving birth, they would take their babies in their arms and jump into the ocean. Like, they would be gone. That's how horrific the treatment of the Taino indigenous peoples were. I mean, if you revolted, if you stood up, you voiced your opinion, you didn't agree with the enslavement, they would chop off, a limb, a private part, and they would parade you they would make you wear that part around, a finger or 2 fingers. They would make it a necklace, and you would walk around the village and show your experience and show, set an example. Like, if you do this, this is going to happen to you. So, these books don't always tell you the fact. They're going to tell you the fiction. These, I'm thinking, they're going to tell you the fact. This is going to tell you the fiction. Now, I'm not saying all these books of the Irving's books are fiction. I think it's more or less some of it is fiction and some of it is fact. The journals are fiction. The letters are, the journals are fake. The journals are fact. And the story is fiction. When he narrates, that's the fictionary part. So basically, of 350 pages, we'll say, there's about maybe 50 pages or so that is journal, letters.
You know, it's amazing. You ever wonder, someone at that time, even like today, we do a lot of documentation, but we don't write anything down. Everything's on video that we document now more than written. I mean, some things are written because we still have magazines, we still have articles online, rather the internet. So yeah, technically things are still written. Excuse me. But I was going to. My point was, what would think somebody to write the accounts of the voyages to sit there and say, "Hey, someone 500-600 years from now will love to hear about this story." It's amazing. I'm just saying, just to think about, to write the account.
See, I think they knew that this was going to change history. They knew, Columbus knew, he didn't care about the people. He didn't care about Portugal, and he didn't care about Spain. All I mentioned is Portugal. I think, in my strongest opinion, not as a conspiracy, but not as a conspiracy theorist, that there is fact. There's a lot of documentaries and documents and a lot of talks that has been said that Cristobal Colon was a double agent that sailed for both Portugal and Spain. And, you know, Washington Irving's not going to write, "Oh, he's a hero, but he's a double agent." You know, like.
Well, you know, the thing is, all through, school, our history books were so generalized, and it's only generalized on the good.
It was placed strategically placed to tell somebody else's history.
Right.
Because there's no South American history.
No.
I mean, right? There's only bits and pieces.
Bits and pieces.
You know,
I know, I disagree with that. I think there is a South American history.
Just not a part of the American history.
Oh,
because
no,
when I went to school for American history,
no.
They didn't tell the contributions of the Puerto Ricans.
Nope.
In every war, every Puerto Ricans fought in every single war.
Oh no, there's a lot of people between Puerto Rican and blacks, and even some Mexicans who contributed to the United States.
Yeah.
Graciously.
Yeah.
And it's not taught.
100%.
It's definitely not taught in school. I didn't find out a lot of stuff until I was and then I got into college.
Listen, we didn't know Columbus didn't sail. Well, we didn't know Columbus discovered America. See, Columbus never discovered America, and neither did he claim to discover America. He claimed that he discovered the West Indies.
Well, the thing is, what brought my attention to some history of myself on Columbus. That's why I agree with you when they, take down the statues. But I don't agree with deleting the history.
Well, you can't delete history. You can't.
But when I think back of
can't erase the history.
No, not talking about history. No, of course not. Not recent. I'm just trying to think of the name.
Revisiting. The revision.
No.
That's what I feel like I am. I'm a revisionist.
I'm going to say the name wrong, but
woke.
Correct me.
The woke.
No, a person. Vasco Santiago?
What do you mean? Who's that?
The guy that came before Columbus.
No.
Yeah. There was a guy.
No. You mean Amerigo Vespucci?
Thank you.
He was the Italian explorer. That, well, actually, if you go to 1398,
right,
where Newfoundland, almost 100 years to the date, Newfoundland, where a Knights Templar by the name of, and you can fact check this, Henry St. Clair discovered America, but did not get the flowers. So then 50, 60 years later, a man by the name of Amerigo Vespucci officially discovered America. See, there was no there was no story. Well, Leif Erikson was a Viking who came in the 1300s as well.
But there was another guy.
Amerigo Vespucci
Even before Amerigo Vespucci.
gets his flowers for
America.
officially
But there was
discovering
a,
America.
let me see if I can look it
But
up
there's
real
no
quick.
backstory to Vespucci,
There's
so
there was
they
a-
use Columbus as the anchor.
right. I mean, there was. Yeah, but there's
I'm
not.
gonna
it's-
get my
it's not fault.
cell phone real quick.
Let me see.
Put my cell phone over here to. I think I was going to use it for some research, but we can Google who is said
It
to
was a conquistador, I believe. Who-
Del Soto. Del Soto was
Maybe-
after Columbus.
No, it's before.
Cortez.
Was it Cortez?
Cortez was after Columbus. We'll ask the question, right? We'll ask the question on Google,
Let's see.
on live YouTube. Was there other?
Oh, Leif Erikson. Okay, it was Leif Erikson then. That came up 500 years before Columbus. He
Yeah,
came
that
in
would be-
1001 AD.
But there's not a lot of account of that. There's no.
Right.
There's no There's only a few. So that's why they just say it's a very strong.
Okay, so Leif Erikson. Okay, because he was the Viking, of course, which is now Norway, Switzerland, and Sweden, and
Yes.
Finland.
Well, I mean, Leif Erikson. He discovered what is, I guess, the northern part of Canada.
Right.
I don't
Remember,
know.
We're just separated by lines, so it was all complete landmass. We're just
Yeah.
separated by the 49.
We're just saying this
Yeah.
because that's where Newfoundland, Greenland, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, those places where the Vikings,
Right.
Leif Erikson, discovered America.
Right.
But Amerigo Vespucci knew something
Mhm.
because of the works, because of Toscanelli. Toscanelli was, and Marco Polo.
Mhm.
There's writings. Marco Polo was from where, right? From Europe.
You're
So Marco Polo wrote about these enchanted islands.
right.
That he wrote. I guess he wrote about the city of gold.
Mhm.
I think they wrote about. I don't know if he wrote about Atlantis.
Probably so. I was just watching something, believe it or not, on another thing on Atlantis and all, and there's a lot of not to digress from what you're talking about, but just say simple is that this is probably another segment of the story you probably want to talk about later, probably after Columbus, about cities that are underwater that used to be on land. And some say it was because of earthquakes. Some say it was because after the floods, that was actually barren land at one time. And when the floods came in and the waters receded, is where they land.
Remember, we have that
present day.
legendary Bible story of the Great Flood.
Right.
So you're going to get that story, the Great Flood, where some of the Atlantis was completely
Yeah.
submerged because
I believe because there's
it's a possibility.
It's a possibility because even
We don't know. It's
was
just
it Socrates
yeah.
that said talked about it.
Socrates, Plato,
Plato.
a lot of others. I don't know who else. But I think Plato, Socrates, Marco Polo. I think I guess these scholars. I don't know who really talked about the
Yeah.
the Fountain of Youth, Lost City of Gold. The Lost City of Atlantis.
You know what I think? I think there was probably a Fountain of Youth, but I think it was probably in Atlantis,
Probably.
and that's why when was it Vasco da Gama that was trying to discover
I
South
don't know.
America?
I don't know who Vasco da
Forgive
Gama
me,
is.
or is it Santiago? It was one of those. But anyway, when they went to discover
Ponce de Leon.
Thank you very much. And when he went down to South America trying to look for the Fountain of Youth, he couldn't find it. And I always wonder, I said, could the Fountain of Youth actually been in the city of Atlantis? Because, like I said, they talked
Well,
like
I
the
mean,
city of gold and
There is
Riches.
there is ancient Mayan ruins in Mexico and
Yeah.
in South America, some of these jungles, remember,
Yeah.
completely submerged.
Right.
That nobody even knows that they exist.
There's even a pyramid that's supposed to be bigger than the Giza.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So they just don't know how to get to these places, or they, the forest is
I
very
think-
hard to get to.
You know, I call BS on that because if a government really wanted to, I mean, look at Japan. Look at
Well,
here in the United States.
the government, the government of these, countries probably like, well,
They probably just don't want to disturb it.
we don't want to disturb it. We don't want to create, we don't want to create a tourist attraction in
Right.
a remote part of the jungle where many people could die
Yeah.
getting there.
Because-
there's not enough money to travel there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Because if
they
really,
probably don't want
the
nothing
type-
to do with it,
there's two things. Because the reason why I call BS on that, is-
or
I
they
looked
know something that they're
Yeah,
not telling the
something else,
people.
Right. Because there's two things. One, I'll give you a prime example. Look at Japan and look at China. They build infrastructure around the most impossible ways you wouldn't even think of.
Correct. China, Great China, Wall of China.
Yeah. Yeah. Stuff, I wish they would do here. Secondly, look at Antarctica. It's the only continent which could go two ways, because even with older maps, which could go two ways. One is that we're actually completely within the ice wall, which Admiral Byrd said we were in 1950, before they put regulation on Antarctica. Or number two, it is a circular thing, and there isn't an ice wall. We don't know for sure, unless we actually go there and travel along the wall itself. But you need a powerful ship, because those waves and everything I've heard are very, very rough in that area. Secondly, or actually thirdly, when Admiral, I just said his name too, the Admiral Byrd went into Antarctica. He said when he flew there, he saw animals, he saw dinosaurs. He said temperature was like 75 degrees, and it's amazing. But you have to go beyond. I forgot how many, so many, like 100 miles out. But at the same time, the U.S. military will stop you going to a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, that's why I call bull on that, because there's secrets. There's even in Arabic countries, there's places like in Iraq and stuff, they don't even allow tourists to go to a mountains. They claim it's sacred, and no one's allowed up there. But what's hitting up there? So I believe a lot of stuff that was in the past that are buried, or they were actually found, especially by the Vatican, which has, which I was told by a security guard one time, it has like 5 or 6 floors deep, and about the size of a football field down there, which the library goes all the way even out of Vatican City in a way. But
Well,
my thing is-
they say that the famous Library of Alexandria that was set on fire,
they said
that
that was
not
a lie.
all the books were lost.
Actually, they said none of the books were lost. They took the book. They took the books. The Roman.
How do you
Pope at
how do
the
you
time.
how do you make a populace illiterate? You take
The books.
the books away.
Took the books away.
How do you think I'm going back to investigate and find
Remember
my
Hitler?
story?
Yeah.
You got to go back to the books.
Yeah, remember Hitler did it too. They had to burn all.
They burned all the books. Remember, they burned all the books.
And
So
all
to make everybody illiterate, there was no history on the,
even here in the United States, and even in Europe for a time.
not a lot of written history
Yeah,
left in Germany, because remember the
Remember.
Nazis first burned the books, right?
Mhm.
And then when the Allies bombed Germany, it was
yeah.
imploded.
Well,
It was
and-
rubble.
And think for almost 1,500 years, no one was allowed to read the Bible. You had to be read by the priests, which was in Latin. It wasn't even in English until King James, came along and rewritten it and allowed everybody to read the Bible. Can you believe that? It took almost 1,500 years.
I
'Cause
believe
even in Europe, you weren't allowed, because if you read the Bible, you got punished.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe that to be 100% fact, because
Mm-hmm.
looking in America,
Yeah.
If you were not white,
White. You couldn't.
you couldn't read the Bible.
Yeah.
And if they caught you reading the Bible,
Actually, you couldn't read anything.
I mean,
You weren't even allowed to read.
you
and
were
write.
not allowed to read. They didn't. If you were caught reading, you would be
Persecuted.
persecuted in so many
Yeah.
ways.
And believe it or not, I believe
But-
New Jersey and Mississippi were probably the last states to allow African
But
Americans.
back to my question,
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're getting off.
Columbus.
Yeah.
Do you think some of it's fact, or do you think it's mostly fiction? I mean, what are your take on it? Since I mean,
Well, I think a lot of stuff is facts. Even what we taught in school were somewhat facts, but I also think the part that was fiction, that he was a good man, and he did, because he discovered America, which I think false, because like you said, of the carnage and the raping.
I mean, he discovered the islands in the Caribbean that were attached to the Americas.
Right.
He gets the real credit because he made contact.
Yeah.
He put flags down. You know what I'm saying? His intention was to explore. That's why he gets more of the credit. Fact, like you said, he probably was.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot. Whatever he was, they say he was. He had brothers. He had a son, and illegitimate son.
Right.
He had two sons. One son officially was Diego.
Mm-hmm.
But back to what I'm saying, a lot of it's fact,
Right.
but in my opinion, a lot of it's fiction.
Fiction.
And
And the thing
it's
is,
it's most of the story is fiction.
I'm going to tell you this. Especially a lot of Italian Americans, and you and I being pretty much half Italian. I guess
Hold on, real quick.
Yeah.
You hold that thought. And I don't want to say that, I'm not trying to say that Columbus or Cristobal Colon was a made up, a fictional character. He was not.
Right.
We're just saying that his story behind him
Yeah.
wasn't all true.
Exactly.
All right, back to you.
Exactly. The adventures, a lot were true. But the thing is, every culture has to really wake up and smell the coffee and know the truth and not be afraid of the truth. Because the lies are told to us so strong, people take them as truth. And that's why there was such a backlash against, Columbus, and saying, well, if you're going to take that down, we're not going to be in this area because of Columbus. And I'm going to tell you, because the thing is, well, first of all, if you're going to immortalize someone that did good for the Italian Americans, there's a lot of great Italian Americans that did wonderful things here.
Just to jump on the curtails,
Yeah.
something came up, on my part of my history on my social media, and I posted something like 10 years ago about, it was a meme. It wasn't a meme. It was like an information meme, and it was a phrase, like a quote. Those who are able to see beyond the shadows and lies of their culture will never be understood, let alone believed by the masses.
Right.
That was Plato.
Right.
So, I wanted to say that because of what you talked about just now about the backlash,
Right.
and what I have been saying,
Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah, don't be afraid of the truth. Yeah, I'd be disappointed too that, for 20 years, I mean, look, we went to school. We took history. Nothing bad. They even talked good about slavery,
Well, they talked about
school.
good about the
But they never talked
American
about
indigenous people. We've called them Indians for so many years.
But they're not Indians.
And that's a slang term.
By Columbus.
By Columbus, he branded them
Yeah.
a slang term.
Right.
So I try to say indigenous, native.
So you can say indigenous, native.
Yeah.
Some indigenous people even go by their tribal name. I'm a Iroquois. Not even Delaware Nation. Delaware Nation because Delaware is a French name.
Well, they're
but it
actually
would be like
Lenape. The
Lenape,
Lenape.
yeah,
The
thank you.
Lenape.
Or Lenape.
The Lenape in Indian,
Right.
native Indians
And yeah,
of
Iroquois. Yeah,
Delaware. They were the Delaware
nation.
nation. Well, they were the Lenape nation.
Right.
You know, the natives of
Yeah.
New Jersey, Pennsylvania. You know, like they covered a lot of
ground.
ground all the way up to New York, and they governed themselves.
Right.
You know, the reason why you don't see them out here is because, you know, the American government, you know, abruptly did this. Here, you live in New Jersey, boom, let's go out to the
Mississippi.
reservations, and that's where they.
That's why most reservations are beyond the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
You know, just recently they just applied some reservations here in America. And believe it or not, the natives were going to allow the Europeans to live here, but they didn't expect them. Not, I mean, truth be told, too.
They seen that coming. They seen it
Oh, yeah.
coming.
The Europeans took advantage of because there were factions between the native tribes, and the Europeans took that advantage of it. So don't be fooled by the aggression of two sides, because there's always someone feeding you both beans, and you're fighting against each other.
Well, that is the reason why I decided to say, hey, I'm always talking about Columbus and the story, you know, about him and how controversial it is.
Right.
And so, you know, I'm always tired of getting it from
Mhm.
this end. And I
Exactly.
say, you know, now I'm trying to get it from somebody else, from multiple ends, you know, multiple writers, you know, Columbus himself, Bartolome de las Casas.
Right.
You know, I even went as far as looking for, you know, work on Bobadilla. Francisco de Bobadilla was the noble investigator that went
Right.
down to the Caribbean to investigate the atrocities that, you know,
Okay.
the accusations that Bartolome de las Casas wrote and gave to the crown, and they sent the noble investigator his name was Francisco de Bobadilla.
Well, on that note, I'm going to get ready because we got to wrap it up.
Yeah. And listen, this was just a short discussion. You know, this was just about, you know, it's about that time. You know, that is Columbus Day, and I just figured, since I'm investigating my own, you know, I guess research and investigation. I guess nobody. I'm not saying that nobody. I'm just saying we don't investigate much on demand because we were sold that he was a hero. So I want to look for, you know, I want to reopen the case, not so much, but I want to know more. And so that's why I bought like all these books so I can continue to read and continue to research the truth. You know, I know a lot of it, but it's better to have the receipts. You know, it's better to have the paragraphs where it says there's some of these books and these works have been adulterated. You know, they've been adulterated. I want to know why. I want to know where. So, you know, while I'm reading this book, I want to see if there's a mirror image of what he's telling me in this book or that book. And it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting thing that I'm doing. I don't know if anybody's doing it right now, but it's a unique thing. And listen, if you want to hear more about this, like, subscribe, and, you know, comment. Let me know what you think. If you can follow, you know, or you can subscribe, it'll help out the channel. It'll help to grow the channel. I can bring better videos, better guests. You know, not saying that our guests that we interview are bad, and by no means. I'm saying bigger guests, you know, more guests, you know, more interviews, you know, more topics, more videos, more shorts, anything that pertains to this channel. You know, if you have comments, please feel free to comment, like, subscribe, and share. And as always, I'm Ralph, also known as DJ Noise, and this is In My Circle. You have a great night. Peace.